Have you ever been totally alone and sworn you heard a voice? Now, what if that voice wasn't coming from the shadows, but from the static of a machine you use every day? We're going to get into this, because sometimes our own technology seems to pick up on things that are, well, they're really, really hard to explain. And it all starts with a single, chilling message.
Okay, so picture this. You're in bed, trying to fall asleep, and suddenly your alarm clock radio just snaps on, by itself. But it's not playing music. Instead, this growling, screeching whisper cuts right through the static with just 3 words. This is the climax of a terrifying story someone posted on Reddit, and honestly, it's the perfect place for us to start.
So how do you get from a perfectly quiet room to a hateful message coming out of a machine? Well, to really get it, you have to see how the whole thing started. This wasn't some sudden event. It was a slow burn, a creeping escalation that got worse and worse over time.
And what's so fascinating here is the progression, right? It starts small, with things you could almost talk yourself out of. The pitter-patter of feet. Then it gets physical. A blanket gets yanked off the bed. After that, it's hushed arguments being whispered from inside a closet, with a child's voice warning, "Don't open your eyes." And then you get the grand finale. Technology itself becomes the messenger for that one horrifying phrase, "I hate you."
This whole story just leaves you with this one huge, chilling question. Was it just a random radio signal bleeding through? A weird prank? Or was it something else entirely, actually using the electronics in the room as a kind of mouthpiece? And as it turns out, this is far from the only time something like this has been reported.
So this one person's story, it's really a gateway into a much bigger, much stranger phenomenon. We're moving from a single experience into a whole world of unexplained electronic signals that people have been documenting for decades.
And this stuff has a name. The official term is electronic voice phenomenon, or EVP. Sometimes you'll hear it called Tonbandstimmen, which is German. It basically refers to any speech-like sounds that show up on recordings with no obvious source. And the modern study of it really kicked off back in 1959 with the Swedish artist Fredrik Jürgensen. He was just trying to record bird songs, but instead, he captured what he was convinced were voices from beyond the grave.
And it's not just voices hiding in static. The world of radio paranormal is filled with all kinds of bizarre events. You've got long-delayed echoes where radio signals come back minutes after they're sent, and scientists are just stumped. There are stories of phantom broadcasts, like a powerless WWI-era radio up in Scotland that people swear plays Glenn Miller. And there are even these wild stories of ghost repeaters in the ham radio world, where operators are talking through equipment that's supposedly been offline for decades.
But these strange sounds, they're really just one piece of the puzzle. It turns out our senses can be tricked in other ways too. We don't just hear things that aren't there. Sometimes we see them. Sometimes we even draw them on our maps.
And this is where we see this really fascinating link between different kinds of ghosts. So on one hand, you have phantom islands, actual geographical ghosts that showed up on maps for centuries before being undiscovered. Turns out they were just navigational errors or mirages. Then, on the other hand, you have shadow people, perceptual ghosts, those quick, human-shaped shadows you catch out of the corner of your eye. See the connection? Both are phantoms, born from glitches in our tools of perception, whether that tool is an old sailing map or our very own brain.
And these phenomena, they often seem to cluster in certain places that become legendary over time. Take Clinton Road in New Jersey. It's this desolate 10-mile stretch of road that's famous for all sorts of folklore. Everything from ghost boys at bridges to phantom headlights that will chase you down the road before just vanishing. It's like a magnet for all these different types of phantoms to coexist.
Okay, so we've dug into the stories, the folklore. But what if the ghost isn't from some other dimension, but it's right here in the flaws of our own technology and our own perception? It's time to flip the coin and look at the science behind the signal. The thing is, our electronic signals are surprisingly fragile. Something as simple as a bunch of trees can block or scatter them. If you're in a city, signals are bouncing off buildings like crazy. That's called a multipath error, and it totally confuses receivers. Heck, our own atmosphere bends and delays signals constantly. Our world is just full of natural interference, creating this constant background of electronic noise our gadgets have to sort through.
Here is a perfect everyday example of how technology can seem haunted when it's just doing its job. A GPS device that's been off for a while has to do a cold start. It has to re-download all this data from scratch. It can take minutes, and it feels like it's broken. But a hot start, when you use it all the time, is almost instant. It's not a ghost in the machine. It's just how the machine works. And it shows you how easily we can mistake a totally normal process for something weird or broken.
And then there's maybe the most powerful explanation of them all, and this one's all in our heads. It's called auditory pareidolia. This is our brain's incredible, and sometimes totally misleading, ability to find meaningful patterns in random noise. It's the reason we see faces in clouds, and it's the exact same reason that when we listen to a bunch of static, our brain might just connect the dots and hear a whisper that says, "I hate you."
So what we're left with are two very different, but both pretty compelling stories. One is full of voices from some other world, and the other is totally grounded in physics and psychology. Let's put them side by side and see where we land.
So on one side, you have the paranormal interpretation. It sees these events as real communication, voices of spirits or maybe echoes of the past that are being picked up by our super sensitive technology. Then you have the scientific explanation, which says what we're hearing is basically a perfect storm of normal stuff. Stray radio signals, technical glitches, and our own brains just filling in the blanks. Both are trying to explain the exact same chilling experience.
And that brings us right back to where we started. When a machine speaks with a voice that shouldn't be there, what are we really hearing? Is it just a simple glitch in the system, a crossed wire, a bouncing signal, a trick of the mind? Or are our devices, in their own weird way, becoming sensitive enough to give us a short, terrifying glimpse into something else entirely? For now, the answer is still lost somewhere in the static.